We will be looking at the tools bar, and I'll start with selecting object and then taking a look at transforming. So with the pick tool selected, just click in. I can select this and move that. I'm going to zoom into this to make it a little bit easier to see. All I can do is Shift F2. It will zoom to whatever that is selected. So when I click on the object, you see my selection handles around here. So if I do a second click, I can rotate these elements. Now you see the rotation handle, and these are rotation handle, and this is a skewing handle. So now this little object is the pivot point. I can left click and drag in here. And now if I move one of the rotation handles, it is actually the pivot around this point. I'm going to do F4 and zoom back to my page. We'll talk a little bit more about the ways of selecting. So I'm going to undo this step. Okay. I'm just going to zoom into this area a little bit. I'm going to use my roller ball on the mouse. If I click and drag, it will create a marquee that allows me to select whatever is within this marquee. So if I let my mouse button go at this point, I can see what elements here are selected. One thing to note is that if I do not completely encompass an element, it will not select it. Let's say here it's not taking a selection. It needs to cover up the whole thing to be selected. Now there are a couple of different shortcut keys that I can use to change the way to pick tool selects. For example, if I hold down the Alt key and click here, allows me anything that my marquee touches will be selected. And so you can see with the Alt key, it will allow me to select those elements with the objects that are grouped together, and we know how they're grouped because you remember the status bar. And here it will show at the bottom, it's a group of so and so objects. Let's say here ungroup this. Let's say right click ungroup, click on this and move it here. So select here, you can see 9 objects selected. If I press Ctrl G, group of 9 objects on layer 1 have been selected. So if I wanted to select an element within the group, all I need to do is hold down the Control key and click on the element, and I will get the sizing handles. Also, I can move this around. I don't want to do that for now. I'll just press undo and it's placed where it should be. Now this is showing me that I have this object selected, and you will notice the sizing handle are round dots. Of course, you can use them as well as opposed to square. This is a visual indication that actually I'm selecting an object that is within the group of objects. Now also I have a freehand pick tool, and the freehand pick tool allows me to create an irregular shaped marquee. So rather than the standard rectangular or square marquee, I can do a freehand pick and select it that way. All I'm going to do is I'm going to press F4 to see here on my screen. I'm going to take a look at transform now. Here it can include only these objects here. So let's choose this to be part of my selection. Then make sure it encompasses it whole. Yeah, now it is selected. Now I'm going to take a look at the transform now. Free transform. This basically allows me to transform. Click on this object and click and drag. It allows me to transform, change the height or width, whatever I want. Vertically I can change the height, and now the accelerated keys or shortcut keys to be used with this. For example, if I hold on the control key, it is going to scale up proportionally. It will change both height and width, and it will allow me to maintain the same aspect ratio. One final keyboard shortcut with the pick tool is the double click on the pick tool. And what it'll do, it is gonna select everything on the page. So as you can see, the pick tool is a very flexible tool, and the one that you'll be finding yourself using quite a bit. Now moving on to our next toolbar. Next we have the shape edit. It provides 7 tools. Allows you to manipulate over vector objects. Now, do you remember what a vector object is? It's an object that's made up of line segments that have start points and end points. These points are called nodes. There's a 3 type of node. First is a cusp node. Let's take a look at the types of node here. Okay. This is a 3 node line here. This is a okay. I'll select the line with using the shape tool. And as I select the node, I have the ability to control the handle. Right, like so. And with the cusp node, I can create sharp turns into a line. The cusp, double click here, I'll just click here and here. Go to line, cusp node, and with the cusp node, I can grade turns as well. Now, smooth node allows me to create a smooth transition. Click and drag. This will be considered as a smooth node. By moving my handles up or down, and they move independently of each other. Symmetrical node allows me to move the handles in symmetry with each other. I'll just click on this. These two have a symmetry now, and they will scale up or down. These will move together with respect to each other. Right, like so. Creating smooth flows in a path, and to add a node, it's simply a matter of double click on the shape with an object. Double click here, and I have another node on this line. To remove nodes, it's simple, same thing, double click and it will remove the node. Double click and there, it will remove the node. I'm going to zoom back to my page. We're going to switch to the next tool, which is called a smooth tool. I'll just go ahead and delete this object. Before I do that, I would want to select this element here. Maybe this one. Okay. Now with the shape tool, I'm going to marquee select this and go to smooth. And it is going to make my object relatively smoother than it was before. Basically, it does is it brings down the nodes, number of nodes that are used to create this object, and it will bring down the number of nodes in that object. It is as simple as that. Now I'm going to my shape tool again, and here say I'll select this shape tool, I'll select the whole thing here, shape tool, I just do an F4 to zoom back to my document. Now we are going to take a look at smear and twirl. Smear. And I'm going to go ahead and smear this object right like so. Allows me to smear the element inward or outward depending on what your requirement is. I can change the shape of it. Also, I can increase or decrease the size of the intensity that I'm using here, and I have the ability to bring down the size of this as well. I'm holding Control Shift and left arrow key and moving it up or down is going to bring down the controls of this brush. Twirl is very similar to that. It is going to do as it's mentioned. It is going to twirl the direction of this edge. I can also change it in opposite direction. Here I have anti-clockwise, and there I can do that as well. You can do it on text as well. You can but first you need to convert the text into curve, and you'll have to, then it will apply this effect, otherwise it won't work. But you can create some very interesting effects with it. The next one is the attract and repel. Let's go in here, attract and repel. It can attract outwards and it can repel as well. So it allows me to again organically change the shape of an element. And the two final tools I would like to take a look at is Smudge and Roughen. Let's put this aside, and maybe I'll just take this tool, and I'm gonna fill this here. And okay, so Smudge. I'm going to increase the brush size of it. Okay. So left click on the element and I can smudge this inside, or maybe I can smudge it outside. And do a number of different things with that. Of course, there's setting up here. I can adjust the tilt of the pen here. these settings are pressure sensitive. So if I happen to be using a Wacom tablet with a stylus, then I can make use of these settings as well. And the final one is roughen. So I'm going to zoom into this a little bit, and I'm going to use the roughen here. Click and drag, and there. It works right like so. And you can see this is what a roughen brush would do. Just increase the brush a bit, and then we'll give you a little bit of roughen. I can change the pattern of that, the frequency and number of settings here we have here. And we will take a look at some other tools that will allow you to change the shape of an object or a group of objects with some crop tools that can be found here in the crop flag here. Now I'm going to show you the crop tool to start off with. First, with my pick tool selected, I will select this element. I'm going to hold Shift F2 to zoom in to that particular selection. Now with my crop tool selected, is simply a matter of clicking and dragging and selecting the area you want. Then I can just click, or I can just click on this icon here in this little mini icon group crop toolbar, and that will crop out that portion for me and throw the rest of it away. Now I'm just gonna do F4 zoom here, F4 zoom to go back to my design. The next flyout is the knife tool. Now the knife tool allows me to cut an element. It can do either a straight line, I could do a freehand bezier or a bezier, and then also I have to auto close curves on that. One of the things about auto closing curves is that if I had an outline that was actually a curve, it will close that off and it will allow it to maintain the fill. There's also the ability to change the span of cut. For example, I can see here either gap or overlap. Selected. I can select the overlap amount. Say overlap and amount. I'm just gonna go my pick tool here. Zoom in here. Now with my knife tool selected, I'm going to go ahead and choose gap this time. And let's say I want to go gap 0.185, go tab. Alright, so now if I left click and drag and hold control will for the straight line. And then this will allow me to create a straight line. And here, if I let the mouse button go, I have 1.00, the unit that I mentioned here, width coming up here. I can do Control Z to undo that, and I can change the gap to overlap. Now, so again, I'm going to make a cut, holding Control and release. Now, if I select this portion, say this portion, you have to ungroup that and click and drag up above here. As you can see, this is an overlap here, right here. The same thing with the shoe. is of course overlining this as well. So you can see I have 1/8 of overlap. Now it's useful thing if you're doing something like embroidery, for example, where you might be doing what we can call a split front, where gaps around the front of a jersey, or if you picture a baseball jersey, the gap would be ideal for putting on a window, maybe where there's a window frame in the middle and you want to straddle that. So it's ideal to do that. I'm going to go ahead and give undo for this command. Undo. And move on to our next tool, which is the virtual segment tool. Now, long name for a little tool does a great job. Say I'm going to move here and I'm going to go ahead and select this. Click here. It takes to a path that has another path intersecting, and where they intersect, it will take that as a virtual segment and it will allow me to delete that. So I'm going to click on this one there, delete. I can go around and delete this area. Click and drag will help me do that. Now if I hold the Alt key here, it will make a freehand drawing here, right like so, and it will create a gap right like that. And it will delete anything that the path touches or the marquee touches will be deleted. So it's a great way to build out elements from simple elements just by deleting their paths like that. Now I'm going to go back to my page F4, and this time I will grab my eraser tool. Now the eraser tool works as an eraser on a pencil. For example, it works on vector images as well as raster images. Now I'm going to import an image here. Say this one, import, click. It's a huge image. Maybe I'll just bring it down right like so. At the corner. Okay. All right. So I'm going to select this image here and tap spacebar. That's going to go back to my eraser. It's quite large, so the eraser has to be large as well. So I can increase my size clicking on this option here. Maybe I want a 3-inch eraser. Oh, this is too big. I can hold Control Shift and left mouse click and click and drag. That will give me the mouse, the eraser brush as well. Now I have the ability of erasing this portion of the image, right like so. So if you want to recreate or if you want to change the shape of a bitmap, you can erase the portions of that. Now one thing I should point out here about eraser is that when erasing part of an image, it is only creating what we call a soft mask. It is not actually removing the image itself. So now if I go ahead and select my shape tool, you can see a couple of nodes here. And if I pull out these nodes, I can restore my image back. Right like so. Now this is important because the file size is not being reduced by erasing elements. Just one thing to keep in mind, as you can see there's a number of different tools that I can use to remove objects or portions of objects from a design. Now I'm going to stay on this page. We can look at different ways to navigate around the document. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this image. Let's take a look at the zoom tool. Here we have the zoom tool, and also it is assigned by the shortcut Z. Now to start off, I'm going to reduce this to 10%. And I'm going to click on my page. Every time I click, it is going, observe here, it is going to double the zoom. Also, once again, if I go to 10 point, if I right click here, it will go farther away. Couple of keyboard shortcuts. F4 is going to zoom everything to fit the page here. Shift F4 would zoom to entire page itself. If I select an element, let's say I'm going to choose my pick tool, go here, Shift F2 will zoom to whatever is selected. So these are the main shortcut keys for zooming. Now of course, zoom tool, with the zoom tool selected, I have roller ball on my mouse, which I can use to zoom in or zoom out. I'm going to do F4 to zoom everything out to on my page, and I will tap my space bar to return to my pick tool. Another tool on the toolbar is the pen tool, but the keyboard shortcut for that is H pen. So if I was to click on this tool, and then I could left click on it and I can drag around my document, but it'll move my page around for me. To get to the back previous tool, of course, we will simply tap the spacebar. Another way to pan the document around is to use the scroll wheel on your mouse. If you push that down, it switches to the pan tool, and you can pan around the document. A nice thing about using the feature, if I let go of that roller ball, it returns back to whatever tool it was previously selected. So for example, I'm going to go in here, move this away. Say I were to draw a rectangle, then I can hold this scroll bar and then go ahead here, and I can draw rectangle here, and I can move and keep drawing rectangles and so on and so forth. So I'm simply holding my scroll wheel. When I move my cursor, it moves the page. When I release the roller ball, it put me back to my rectangle. Now one other view I want to talk about is the new method that is something called Nano Preview. In the bottom right hand corner, where the scroll bars meet, you have small magnifying glass. Let me just zoom in, click on here, and you can zoom around, pan around the area in the document. I can left click on this little magnifying glass and brings up this Nano Preview, and I can move anywhere else in my document. Another way to achieve this is if I have my cursor anywhere on the screen, I will tap the letter N. I can bring up this Nano Preview for me. I can move to a different area of the document and then simply click. It will plant me right there where I had left off. Next tool in the toolbox are the curve tools. I'll click and hold I'm gonna change this page here. Here again. Here we have freehand tool. Select this, and I can move around my cursor, right, like so. If I left click and move, just make a click and click, it will draw a straight line. If I click and drag, it will give me irregular shape lines or whatever I want to type, create a shape. If I left click and let the mouse button go, I can hold the button control, and you can see this actually can constrain this to increments. Now these increments can be adjusted in the tools and options, but for now I'm just going to leave it as it is. If I click the second time, I have a down arrow key. It's indicating if I start with the previous line where I left off, it will draw connecting to that one. Click and drag, hold control, click and drag, hold control with a straight line there. Again, I can go around the screen and double click, single click, whatever I want, click. Click and hold control there. Click here and there. So now I have created a closed path, which I can actually give it a color fill to. So that's the basics behind the curve tool. Its behavior is common with all the tools in this flyout, and that is to say that you can start a new line off where you end the previous one. The next to curve on the curve flyout is the 2 point. I'm going to control A and delete all this. New document for this, specifically like this. Okay. F4. Okay, so moving on to our next tool, that's a 2-point line tool. Allows me to draw only straight lines. Click, click, and I can do straight lines as many as I want using this tool. So I can move this around, right, like so as well, after making the line here. And I can just connect these two as well. Following that, I have a Bezier tool. Allows me to draw curve segments one at a time. I'm going to go double click on my pick tool. Click, drag, click, click. Of course, I can draw straight lines with this, but I can click and drag to make this a curve one as well. So I'm going to double click on my pen tool, pick tool, and delete all this drawn on this page, just to clear the screen. Now the next tool on the curve tool flyout is the pen tool. It allows you to draw curves and segments and preview segments as you draw them. Click and drag, click. Single click will give me a straight line. Click and drag will give me a curved line. I can double click and cut this, and I can continue using this. Click and drag. You can also hold Alt and turn this around. If I hold Control, I can move this as well. And right like so, I can create the shape using the pen tool as well. Now the B-spline tool lets you draw curved lines by setting the control points that shape the curve without breaking it into segments. Next, moving on, we have this B-spline. Quick. So it sets control points along the way, and I can draw the paths of that way. The polyline tool lets you draw curves and lines in a preview mode. Let's go ahead and choose polyline. I'll just go ahead and Control A, delete, double click on this one as well, delete. Polyline tool, and I can create whatever shape I want. Click and drag, freehand drawings, or I can just click and draw a straight line drawing, right, like so. One click will create a straight line, and if I click and drag, it will give me these rough lines. That's about it. And if I hold down the mouse button, I can draw the irregular shaped path. The final tool on the curve flyout will be the 3-point curve tool. It lets you draw a curve by defining start, end, and the center point. So if I go here, 3-point curve, click and drag, and then the straight line, I can then change it to the curve, click and drag, and I can make a leaf, right, like so. Now we're going to discuss some of the drawing tools. This comes up in a different category here. This includes artistic media, live sketch, and the smart drawing tool. So I'm going to go ahead up here and choose this to start off with. I'm using my Wacom tablet and pen. The reason for this is that with the artistic tools, there is a number of properties that I do not have access to with a mouse or a trackball. Now I'm going to start with the artistic media. Within the artistic media, there's different pens that you will have. They include a brush, a sprayer, calligraphic pen, and the expression pen. Now the only ones we are going to be looking at here are the calligraphic pen and the expression pen. Calligraphic lines vary in thickness according to the direction of the line and angle of the pen nib. Here we have the ability to control freehand smoothing. I can control the width, as well as the angle. These options allow me here to scale with the object or show the bounding box of the resulted object. Now I'm going to do a couple of strokes on the page to show you how it will look like. So for example, if I give an L shape, stroke down and then across, and note that your vertical strokes are wider and the horizontal ones are kind of comparatively thinner, gives you type of a calligraphic feel to it. So we can create a number of different strokes, curved strokes as this, and I'm just going to do something very simple here. So you can see how the pen sort of flows to a calligraphic style. Next, the pen expression pen. I'll just select all these and delete. And here, okay, expression pen. This tool can allow you to control pen pressure, tilt, and bearing. I don't have pen tilt option and pen bearing option, so they're kind of off, but I do have the pressure sensitivity option. And this would also depend on your stylus or pen and if they support them. Pen pressure lets you vary the size of the brush and ability to toggle on and off. If you're using a stylus that supports pressure, you can set this in the tools option. CorelDRAW. Here I have the pen settings. Now I simply need to create 3 strokes to adjust my pressure, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to vary weight, pressing down the nib, and then start with a very thin line and then a thick one. It is actually going to allow me to calibrate my pen here. I'm going to go ahead and give save and go OK. Let's take a look at other features that we have here. So this allows me to vary flatness of the tip of the nib. As you can see, I could draw thin line and thick lines as well. Tilt would allow you to vary the flatness of the pen nib. And then the pen bearing allows you to vary the rotation of the pen nib. And the final option that we have is to scale the stroke object. Scale stroke with object means I can resize the design afterwards, and the stroke width will scale proportionally. And of course, the bounding box will turn on and off the visibility of the bounding box. Right, like so. Now if I draw a stroke, I can vary my weight just like I did here. So I'll now start off light, and then we'll increase the pressure gradually and release. And there's a number of tools that support pressure. They can include eraser tool, smooth, smear, twirl, attract, repel, smudge, and the roughen tool. Now the smudge also supports tilt. The next tool we're going to talk about is the live sketch. It's kind of a revolutionary feature that eliminates a time-consuming task for sketching on paper, scanning, tracing to vector, by enabling you to start your design directly on screen. Before I start, I'm going to switch to my tablet mode. So I'm going to go to my welcome screen here, and I'm going to choose the workspace. I'll select the touch workspace. Now this workspace has been optimized for touch-enabled devices such as touchscreens, graphic tablets, 2-in-1 computers, and that sort of thing. Now what is immediately noticeable is about this workspace is the absence of menu bar and the standard toolbar across the top. The main use for this workspace is to draw or sketch as you go. That being said, menus are still accessible from here, the bottom left corner, and other features of the note with this workspace. Let's go ahead and select all these, get delete. Okay. Toolbox has a limited set of tools at your fingertips. Now, although these tools are not on the screen, they are still accessible through shortcuts. And some of the tools that we are on the standard toolbar are now in the toolbox, such as copy, cut, paste. Corel was able to capture the way an artist applies a stroke by hand and use overlapping strokes, folded lines, and even chicken scratches to draw the shapes that they want. And they developed CorelDRAW to interpret and represent these strokes. So drawing a stroke, and once the pen is lifted off, the stroke starts the timer. If you wish to cancel the timer anytime and commit to a stroke, you can tap Enter key. Now this timer is not available particularly workspace by default because the property bar is not available. So if I right click on the blank area of any toolbar, I can select property bar. It will appear on the screen. So here we have the ability to include curves, and this is the number of pixels, the distance from the curve, and automatic smooth curving, as well as ability to add bounding box. And then preview mode. So as I draw a stroke, let me just increase time. Properties. Draw here, I can just commit to this here, press enter, and there I have my stroke, right like so. So I make this shape here. Also I can do a chicken scratch here. Make the curve shape right like so. So as you can see, it's creating a smooth curve for me. Now a couple of points as we are creating other objects. It's also possible to set the default fill and outline style and color. However, when sketching, the line will appear as black default until it's been committed. With a little bit of practice and drawing skills, you will be able to see that this one is a powerful tool. Go back to properties, right click, properties. And that's our chicken strokes that we can do. It's a smart drawing tool. Next tool, we will look at the smart drawing tool. Let's delete all this and go to smart drawing tool. Now I'm going to close off my property bar now. Okay. So now the smart drawing tool allows you to convert freehand strokes to basic shapes and smooth curves. First of all, I'll draw an ellipse. And there, it will automatically smooth the lines. Now if I were to draw a rectangle, it'll come up as a square. So very quick and very easy. I'm able to draw basic shapes freehand with my stylus, and it will create them for me. Now we are going to look at some how to create basic shapes with various tools within CorelDRAW. Understanding the file formats, we discussed the differences between our raster and the vector file and learned that vector objects are made up of lines that have start and end points, also called nodes. These lines go to make up some basic shapes that become the building block of the design. We'll be looking at a couple of different toolbars that will allow you to create easy basic shapes. So let's start by bringing this one. Okay, I'm going to create a new document. Okay, previous settings. Okay. First we have the rectangle tool, followed by the ellipse tool, and then finally the shape tool. Let's deal with the rectangle tool first. By clicking on the rectangle tool, it will allow me to left click and drag and create a rectangle. Click here, left click and drag. There we have our rectangle. Now if I hold the control key, it will give me a perfect square, and with the shift key it will give me rectangle from center out. Next to the toolbar, we have the 3-point rectangle. It's a matter of left clicking and dragging. Let the mouse button go and then create a rectangle, like so. Left click, drag. I'm going to hold control if I want this to be a straight line. Release and click and drag. So when I create my first line, I can create an angle, release, and then I can have a rectangle on an angle. Now let's take a look at the ellipse tool and select all these and delete. It is the same thing. I can click and drag. It is going to allow me to draw an ellipse. And if I hold control, it is going to give me the perfect circle. And the shift key will be giving center out. I'm going to go ahead and remove all these elements from the page and Marquee Select with my big tools, simply delete them. Let's take a look at some of the tools on the shapes tool here. The polygon. Select the polygon. You can see my interactive property bar has 5 sides. Let's give it an 8 and it is going to create an octagon. Click and drag and it will give me an octagon. I can adjust the values later and increase or decrease the number of sides. Say I choose 5 sides, it will give me a pentagon. When I'm playing around with this, if I grab the shape tool, if I click and drag, it is going to give me a star. Holding control key allows me to go in right like so to create a perfect star and that sort of thing. Next tool is the star tool. It's gonna make a star right like so. Left click and drag and it allows me to create this kind of star. Of course, I can go up in here and change the number of sides. Also, it will change the number indent as well. And I can play around with these properties. Next tool is my spiral tool. Left click and drag. It is going to create a spiral. You can hold control to give a proper constraint spiral, as well as you can change the direction from here. Click and drag, and there you have it. Also, you can control the number of revolutions or rotations from here, and then you can create that as well. Following that, we have some common shapes. I'm going to double click on the pick tool. Go ahead and press the delete key to remove all those. Now within here, we have common shapes. And here I have the list of a couple of shapes. Say I'm going to click and drag and make this one. So something like a happy face. Then I have that here. And maybe I want this arrow. Click on that, click and drag. Here I have an arrow. And there's a different number of shapes. You'll notice when you explore this menu. Now, if you can see that we have a little glyph here, a red glyph. Click and drag. Go to my shape tool. Click here and click and drag. Shape tool. Click and drag. I can customize this using shape tool. There are some different tools, and you will get in the shape toolbar. And here I can also change the shape of this one as well. Just go ahead and use the shape tool, click and drag, and you can change the type of an arrow that you require. Now we're gonna look at the ability to create the dimension lines. CorelDRAW opens up a lot of flexibility when creating diagrams for layouts. Whether it's for school, home, or business, it's going to start by opening the dimension line. Click on here, parallel dimension. We have 5 types of different tools here. This includes the parallel dimension, which will allow me to create, click and click, click and drag, and there. Allows me to create lines throughout, right like so. Click and drag, and there. So it allows me to put these on any other angle as well. So if I go here, click and drag, and here, click and drag, there. I can have this on vertical or horizontal dimensions. So if I left click and drag, I can create that one as well. Next one is the horizontal or vertical dimension. Say I want here, click and drag, there. Horizontal and vertical only. It doesn't have any angle. It's particularly for horizontal or vertical dimensions as only. Next we have is the angular dimension. It allows me to indicate the angle within the design. Click and drag. There. It changes the size of the angle. Go ahead and delete that. Here we have a perfect 90-degree angle. Now the segment tool here lets you display the distance between the end nodes. In a single or multiple segment line. And we have final two-leg callout. Click here, click and drag here, and I can make it hold control here, and then I can type whatever I want here. So as you can see, yet another set of CorelDRAW tools that can speed up your workflow and save the design time and make it fun and easy to use.